Have you ever felt like you're just working twice as hard as everyone else just to stay afloat? Like you're constantly fighting these battles that seem so simple for other people, but you can't for the life of you figure out why? Well, for a lot of adults, the answer might be a condition that looks totally different in grown-ups than it does in kids. We're talking about adult ADHD, and today we are going to break down the entire evaluation process step by step. I mean, this quote just nails it, doesn't it? It's that exact feeling of confusion, of frustration, of knowing you're smart, you're capable, but somehow you just missed the day they handed out the instructions. So think of this explainer as our attempt to help you find that rulebook. So why is it so common for adults to go their whole lives without a diagnosis? Well, it's because the classic picture of ADHD you have in your head, the kid bouncing off the walls, that often turns into this invisible internal struggle once you're an adult. And a huge piece of that puzzle is something called masking. Think about it. For years, maybe decades, you've probably built these incredibly complex systems just to function. A million alarms, sticky notes everywhere, these super rigid routines. And look, those are brilliant coping strategies. But they can also hide the real underlying challenge, not just from others, but even from yourself, which makes getting a diagnosis that much harder. And this is such a critical shift in perspective. All that feedback you might have gotten about being disorganized or that awful feeling when you miss another deadline, it's so easy to internalize that as a character flaw, right? Like you're lazy or you just don't care enough. But what if it's not about character at all? What if it's a biological issue with something called executive functioning? Getting a diagnosis can completely reframe your entire professional life. Yeah, a big reason it gets missed is that the symptoms literally transform over time. The hyperactive kid who couldn't sit still in class doesn't just disappear. All that energy, it just turns inward. And you can really see that shift right here. Look, the obvious physical hyperactivity in kids, the running, the climbing, that morphs into this internal feeling of restlessness in adults. It's like your brain just won't shut off. And the impact? It's not about school grades anymore. It's about your career, your relationships, just keeping your house in order. And this is a big one. For kids, you have teachers and parents reporting everything. For adults, it's mostly on you to report it, which is way, way harder. So if any of this is starting to sound familiar, you're probably wondering, what does getting answers actually look like? The whole idea can seem pretty intimidating, but a proper evaluation isn't just a quick chat. It's actually a really structured journey, and it's designed to bring you clarity. A really thorough evaluation is a deep dive, and it's typically broken down into these 4 key parts. It all starts with a super detailed interview about your entire life history, not just how you feel now. Then they'll do a specific review of your executive functions. After that, you'll likely do some standardized questionnaires, and finally, they'll look at any old documents, like school report cards that might hold some clues. Right, so when we keep saying executive functioning, what does that actually mean? Well, think of it as the management team in your brain. It's in charge of stuff like time management, sure, but also that huge, monumental struggle to just start a boring task. That has a name. It's called task initiation. It's also about managing your emotions and your working memory. The thing that decides to completely erase your memory the second you walk into a different room. Okay, this part is absolutely crucial. A huge part of any good evaluation is playing detective and making sure something else isn't the real cause of the symptoms. The signs of ADHD can look a lot like other conditions. Let's take anxiety and ADHD, for example. Both can totally wreck your concentration, but the reason why is completely different. With anxiety, your focus is usually hijacked by looping worries inside your own head. With ADHD, it's more like the filter for the outside world is broken. You just can't tune out the sound of your coworker typing, or the car alarm down the street, or even the scratchy tag on your shirt. And it's a similar story with depression. The lack of motivation you feel with depression often comes from a really deep well of low energy and sadness. In ADHD, though, the motivation struggle is often a chemical problem with the brain's reward system. If a task isn't new, exciting, or urgent, the ADHD brain literally can't produce the dopamine it needs to get started. It's less of a won't and much more of a can't. And a really comprehensive evaluation also looks beyond other mental health conditions. It'll screen for physical stuff and lifestyle factors too, things like being chronically sleep deprived, having thyroid problems, or even certain vitamin deficiencies can look and feel almost exactly like ADHD. Okay, so let's say you go through all this and a diagnosis is confirmed. What happens then? Well, this is not the end of the story. Honestly, it's the start of a brand new chapter, one where you finally have a map. What you get is a detailed report that finally puts a name to your lifelong struggles. For so many people, that piece of paper is just incredibly validating. It's the proof that says, see, this wasn't your fault. And even better, that report becomes the blueprint for a personalized treatment plan, one designed specifically for your unique brain. Now, when we talk about treatment, there's this great saying to keep in mind. Pills don't build skills. It's a powerful reminder that while medication can be a total game changer for regulating brain chemistry, it doesn't magically teach you all the organizational skills you may have never had a chance to develop. So the best approach, the gold standard, is usually a two-part plan. It often combines medication, which helps the brain's signaling work better, with things like behavioral coaching or therapy. And that second part is where you learn the practical, nuts and bolts systems from managing your life. And just as important, it's where you start to unlearn all that negative self-talk that's been building up for decades. So if you're thinking this is a step you might want to take, how can you get ready? Here's a quick checklist that can really help. Try to gather any old records you have. Before you go, write down some very specific, real-world examples of how your symptoms mess with your work or home life. If you can, ask a parent or an older sibling what you were like as a kid. And, of course, have a list of any medications or supplements you're taking. Just being prepared can make a huge difference. And that brings us right back to where we started. For years, you might have felt like you were playing this incredibly difficult game without the rules. A proper evaluation, that is the first, most powerful step you can take toward finally getting your copy. It's about trading all that confusion for clarity and swapping self-blame for self-understanding. So really, the only question left is, are you ready to find your rulebook?